Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today's a solo episode, and I have a topic that I'm really excited to chat with you guys about, and it's how to get your body to handle carbs better. I think this is going to do multiple things for you. One, if you are someone who is afraid of carbs and you miss out on the benefits of carbs because of that, because you think it causes you to blow up, whatever. Again, this is going to allow you to be able to handle carbs better and utilize them better for your training, which in turn is going to help you with better body composition. And if you're someone who, again, you just feel like you don't respond well to carbs, it's probably a lot because of the current state your body is in, plus some ways that we go about eating carbohydrates and what we do in our lifestyle that's impacting that there. All right. So with that, I just want to go over a few things before we dive into the episode. So first, if you are interested in a body recomp, what it is, how to do it, 10 things you need, the two types of body recomp, why it's important to focus on body composition, then this checklist is for you, completely free. It's in the show notes. Next, I am dropping my performance recomp method course, hopefully sometime in fall 2025. So this is going to be for people who want to take their own training and nutrition to the next level, but then also eventually get to the point where they don't necessarily need to track every calorie and macro on there. Also for coaches, if you want to help your clients get better results as well too, or maybe you just want to learn more about performance, body recomp, lifestyle stuff, things that I work on with clients, what that looks like, then this course will be for you. So the link to that is in the show notes to get on to the wait list. With the wait list, you'll be the first to hear about it, the first to be able to sign up, and you'll get some money off of the course with that link. So if you're interested in that, the link to that will be in the show notes next. So that's it. So let's dive into today's episode. So again, I want to talk about how to get your body to handle carbohydrates better. People will blame carbohydrates for a lot of things, but I think it just really comes down to the state their body's in and how they utilize carbohydrates. So again, at the end of this episode, you'll have a better idea of how to use carbs and again, how we can get you to the point to where you can handle them better, which means that you're going to be able to utilize them better for training. And this is going to help improve your body composition. And you'll be able to eat carbs and not feel like you blow up or retain a lot of water or feel super inflamed or leads to more hunger, whatever it may be, whatever kind of issue you have with carbohydrates, this will help. Now, I think with this, again, as I said, the big problems with carbohydrates are the state somebody's in, how they utilize them, but then also at the end of the day, a lot of carbohydrates in the modern environment are ultra processed foods combined with high fat as well too. And that's that magic formula that our brain wants and what we want to, that's what's going to almost hijack our brain essentially to eat more food, to consume more calories than what we actually need. And so I think to me, that's the big issue at play and not necessarily carbohydrates themselves there, right? In today's modern environment, it's high calories and it's a lot tougher to get movement in. And again, those are going to be things that really decrease your need for carbohydrates and your ability to handle them as well too. And again, with these types of foods, these highly processed, high fat, high carb foods is, as I said, it's a way to hijack our brain. And essentially people don't really know what, like they're just going through the motions each day. And when we do that, it's easy to overconsume calories. So I have my framework for carbohydrates for clients and what I use. And so just want to briefly touch on those. So first, it's going to, in terms of how many carbohydrates we want somebody to be at, it's going to, one, be based on activity levels. So the more active you are, the higher your carbohydrate intake can be, right? Your body fat percentage, the higher your body fat percentage is, the less of a need there is going to be for carbohydrates, and you're probably not going to be able to handle carbs as well. So the leaner you are, there's going to be a higher need for carbohydrates. Preference is also really important as well too. If you enjoy a little bit higher carbohydrate intake, we're definitely going to take that into consideration. If you enjoy a little bit lower carbohydrate intake, we'll take that into consideration. And then lastly, the phase that you're in is also going to be super important. So if you're in a fat loss phase, that's going to be lower calories in general, right? Compared to what you're typically used to. So with that, you're going to need less carbohydrates because you just have less calories overall. So those are that's the framework that I work with. And then obviously like carbohydrate sources are going to be huge, which we'll talk about today. So with that out of the way, let's dive into what is really going to be the most important. What are going to be the things that we need to do to improve how our body handles carbohydrates, how we can improve our carbohydrate metabolism. The first thing that we need to do is build muscle, right? Like we need to do some sort of resistance training. Obviously, movement, activity in general is going to help with your body's ability to handle carbohydrates, but specifically building muscle is going to be helpful, right? Muscle is essentially a glucose sink, right? It's a sponge for glucose. It's the largest organ system by mass, and our muscle mass serves as a predominant glucose disposal tissue, accounting for upwards of 80% of postprandial glucose uptake. So a lot of, again, your muscle is going to be a big part where, in terms of how you handle glucose, if you don't have a lot, you can run into some issues there, right? So again, with this, we want to make sure we build some muscle, right? And so part of it's going to be doing the right things in terms of resistance training, eating enough protein, sleep, things like that. But again, if you're feeling like you don't handle carbs well, we may need to look at your muscle mass and potentially doing things that are going to help you build more muscle, right? For me, this has been the biggest thing that when clients come to me, they're doing some weight training, but it's not really in a way that's building as much muscle as they think. And muscle is a tough thing to come by. You really need to go out of your way to build muscle. And so, again, in terms of building muscle, it's setting them up in terms of a way of training to make sure that they're going to build muscle. But even in a fat loss phase too, like training in the right way to build muscle and to at least keep muscle, which in turn should help with how your body handles carbohydrates, even when you're in a deficit. And you just see better body composition results from that. Again, number one is we need to build muscle. Also, there was a recent study that Brad Schoenfeld posted about effects of skeletal muscle hypertrophy on fat mass and glucose homeostasis in humans and animals. And analysis revealed that a 1.9 to 3.3 increase in global muscle mass in humans is associated with a 4.1 to 5.8% lower fat mass and a mean relative reduction in HbA1c of 4.1 to 4.6 from baseline and reduction of fasting glucose concentrations by 5.8 to 7.3% in studies lasting 2 weeks to 3 years. You can just see there that's really HbA1c and what was the other? Glucose homeostasis. Like, again, those are going to be big things in terms of how your body handles carbohydrates. So again, we want to make sure we build muscle. Probably want to lift weights at least 2 to 3 times per week there. Next thing we can do is we need to balance our parasympathetic and sympathetic activation, right? So a lot of people are in today's modern environment, they tip more towards just this chronic kind of sympathetic activity versus parasympathetic, your rest and digest. It's a lot harder for people to turn that on, and a lot of people they don't get into that state as often. Again, so essentially this is like stress levels, right? So when your stress levels are super high, you're just not going to handle carbohydrates as well as you would if you weren't as stressed. So we need to balance sympathetic to parasympathetic. So what this means, we can also look at HRV, resting heart rate. So if resting heart rate's high, HRV is low, that's a sign again that we may not handle carbohydrates as well, acutely and long term. And so what are some things that we can do here? We obviously want to manage overall stress load on the body. So go listen to episode, I believe 628. I talk about that. I talk about things that are stressors on the body, plus 3-step framework on how to lower that. And that will be super helpful. Again, good old stress management techniques. Moderating our training intensity and training volume is going to be key here as well, too. If you're someone who trains a lot, you're also pairing that with like really low calorie intake for extended periods of time, you may have a low HRV and potentially higher resting heart rate. So for you, you may need to actually increase good sources of carbohydrates and focus more on recovery there. Someone may need to, if they're chronically overloading their system with food, they may need to decrease a little bit, and that's going to help them with their HRV. But then there's other things that we can do to help manage our stress as well, too. But the big thing being we want to lower overall stress load on our body. And for each person, that may look a little bit different in terms of what we do. It could be smarter carbohydrate intake versus just taking away carbohydrates. For some people, it may be taking carbohydrates away. Doing some more conditioning can definitely help increase your HRV and lower your resting heart rate. So that may be something there. But again, we need to moderate our intensity. But key thing being, if you were to take your blood glucose levels and you were in a higher stress state, so a more sympathetic state versus parasympathetic, you're probably not digesting carbs as well as someone who's in a lower stress state there. So again, figuring out how to balance that out is going to be super important here. Next thing we want to do is we want to get some movement in after our meals. So again, when we move after eating, our muscles become highly efficient glucose disposal units. Basically, just moving after a meal, it's so powerful, it can increase muscle glucose uptake 2 times more than at rest. So again, there was a study. In this study, they found that people that moved within 15 to 30 minutes after a meal, their blood glucose was much lower, right, than someone who just had a meal and they didn't move right after. So again, what this means is it's going to reduce post-meal blood glucose spikes. So again, this means better blood sugar control, fewer crashes, improved appetite regulation, and just long-term metabolic benefits, which in turn is going to lead to better body comp over time. So we can handle carbohydrates better by getting some movement in afterwards. It's also going to help with digestion, reduce bloating, and it's going to help you get more movement in general, which is going to be a key thing in terms of managing your glucose and improving your carbohydrate metabolism as well too. It's, as far as timing goes, this study was done within 15 to 30 minutes. I think as long as you get within an hour, you're probably good, but maybe the sooner the better. But again, big thing being getting movement in after a meal can be super helpful to manage your blood sugar and to help your body and how it utilizes carbohydrates as well too. And just more movement throughout the day as well too, right? Like if we're only getting 3,000 steps, we need to bump that up. So again, we just need to get more movement in throughout the day as well too, right? If you're at 3 to 5,000 steps, maybe you're closer to 6 to 8,000, right? So getting more movement in overall and spread out throughout the day can be super helpful as well too here to get this down. Again, building your cardiovascular system. Basically with this, the higher your VO2 max is, the better just resilience you're going to have, the better your metabolism is going to be overall. You're going to be able to be a lot better at switching between fats and carbohydrates as fuel sources. And again, a well-developed aerobic system is just going to improve how your body handles carbohydrates, right? So this kind of goes into the HRV thing that we just talked about in the lower resting heart rate. The better cardiovascular system will do both of those things. So again, all these things considered, you're going to improve how your body handles carbohydrates. So again, if you have a VO2 max, if you do a test, you could do like a 12-minute Cooper run test, you could do a 2K row test, like things like that, and you're under 50th percentile for your age, you probably need to spend some time doing some conditioning and cardio to get that up. And that's going to help your body handle carbohydrates a lot better. So you could be someone who has a good amount of muscle, but maybe you have a low VO2 max. I would take some time focusing on that. The next thing we can do in terms of cardiovascular is not only building that aerobic base, but also getting some higher intensity type work in as well too, right? And maybe we're doing once a week. But again, we don't want everything to just be like steps. Like again, movement overall is going to be good. Movement after is going to be great, but getting some higher intensity conditioning work in once a week is going to be key, right? Weights could count towards this, but I would want it to be something that's continuous in getting that heart rate up for shorter periods of time at a little bit of a higher intensity, right? So this could be intervals, whatever it is though. This just seems to be just magic for how your body handles carbohydrates. So again, getting some higher intensity work in it, probably about once a week, right? So if we combine it with our improving our cardiovascular system, you're probably looking at 2 medium intensity conditioning sessions, longer, like 30, 45 minutes. And then you're looking at one interval, higher intensity for a little bit shorter of a time. And that can be a great kind of combination there to improve how your body handles carbohydrates. Another thing we can do is get to a leaner slash healthier body fat percentage range. You don't need to be super shredded, but getting to leaner body fat percentage is definitely going to help. We're looking at 10 to 20% for men and 20 to 30% for women. It's a solid target to be at. Everyone's going to be a little bit different, but generally speaking, if you're over that, you're probably not going to be handling carbohydrates as well as someone who is a little bit lower in this range. So what that means is you probably need to, it means you'll need to be lower carbohydrate for a period of time, probably to get down to those levels. So there is going to be that period of time where you'll have to go lower carbohydrate to get down, right? This, if we think back to my carb framework for clients, it's if you're at higher body fats, we need less carbs. If you're in a fat loss phase, you're going to need less carbs. So you can see where this starts to, we're going to need a period of time where we get our carbohydrates down and get to these healthier body fat percentages. Because just typically with the higher you are, your body's just not going to handle the fuel you'll give it on top of obviously not as much movement, because a lot of these things are in combination with some poor lifestyle choices, right? To get over to 20 to 30% body fat, 20% for men, over 30% for women, you're probably going to be doing some things where you're not moving as much. You're probably not making great food choices. Sleep's probably not great. Stress is probably fairly high, plus being really high body fat's a stressor on the body. So all these things start to add up. And again, I think by doing a lot of these things, you're going to naturally handle carbohydrates better and getting just to a leaner range in that 10 to 20%, 20 to 30% for women, your body's just going to handle carbohydrates much better in that state, combined with all these things as well too. Another thing we can do is spend time in a lower carb slash lower energy state every so often. So you don't need to, and you shouldn't be low carb or in a deficit year round. I'm a huge proponent of making sure we eat enough at times, but I think from a carbohydrate standpoint and how we utilize carbohydrates, spending some time in a deficit with a low carbohydrate state is going to improve how your body uses fuel long term. And so I made my case here in episode 609 why I think getting into a calorie deficit every so often is good, even if your body composition is not terrible. Obviously, if you're going from a higher body fat to lower, you're going to need to be in a lower energy state. But say you're in that 10 to 15% range, it's probably not a bad idea to spend some time in a lower carb state for a short period of time, right? Depending on where the person's at. If you're, again, closer, like for men, you're closer to 10 to 20% or 10 to 15%, maybe on the lower end, closer to 10%, and you've just been hammering the carbs, you exercise a ton. I think having a period of time where maybe you lower volume potentially, or keep volume fairly similar. Maybe you lower volume, but keep intensity the same, and you just go lower carb for say 2 to 3 weeks. I think that's going to do some benefit from how your body handles carbohydrates, right? Kind of getting into that other, tapping into fat as a fuel just a little bit more. So doing things that do that. So again, this could be periodic, like like intermittent fasting, things like that, doing a little bit of fasted training every once in a while. I think these are going to be things that will help how your body utilizes carbohydrates. Now, I'm saying that we don't want to do that all the time, especially the leaner you are. You really want to be careful with it, and you want to time it right, and you want to make sure you manage it well. But if you're, say, around closer to 12 to 15% for men, closer to 22 to 25% for women. And you feel pretty good from a body comp standpoint, but you've been hammering carbs, you've been in maintenance, maybe a small surplus. It's probably not a bad idea to dip into a deficit. Now, the higher we are on these body fat percentage ranges, even more likely that we want to get into a lower carb, low energy state every so often. But even if you are on the leaner side, I think there's some benefit to still potentially doing this every once in a while there. Next, we just want to time our carbohydrates smarter. Eat more carbs around your workouts and earlier in the day. Your body's just going to handle carbohydrates much better, regardless of body fat percentage, whatever it is. Your body's just going to handle carbs much better when you eat those carbs around workouts. And again, earlier in the day, right? Your body's just less efficient at processing carbs late at night. So your carbohydrate metabolism just naturally is not as good as we get closer to our kind of sleep time. And again, once melatonin starts to increase and things like that. So we would just want to time our carbohydrates smarter. That's like an easy thing. If you're eating high carb, okay, that's fine. Just eat more of them around your workouts and try to keep them away from sleep as much as possible. Protein, probably not as important in terms of eating it like before bed, but carbs and fats seem to be impacted the most by kind of timing in terms of like time of day and around sleep. And same thing, even if you, and so this kind of goes into this. So dial in your circadian rhythm plus deep sleep. So I think these two go hand in hand, time your carbs smarter and dial in your circadian rhythm and deep sleep. But basically with this, like from a circadian rhythm standpoint, we want to get morning sunlight. We want to limit blue light at night. Again, this is going to set our body up to be the most effective and efficient from a metabolic health standpoint, but also sticking to a relatively consistent sleep and wake schedule. And this is going to come to carbohydrate timing. But like one of the main things is when we get regular sleep around the same time, especially when we fall asleep, you're getting this big portion of deep sleep that you typically get. But when we go to bed later and we miss that like initial kind of period of time of that deep sleep, that's when we get the biggest, like most amount of deep sleep. You're going to impact your sleep quality. And that in turn is going to impact how your body handles carbohydrates the next day. Right. So we want to look at that. Even though you could be sleeping 8 hours, if this is a weekend and you go to bed 2 or 3 hours later, you may not be handling carbohydrates as well the next day. You'll definitely want to pay attention to that. And then I'll give you some wrap up of if some of these things are off, what we can do to manage that. But also on the flip side, if you wake up a lot earlier and you have a big carbohydrate meal at 4 a.m. when you typically don't wake up till 6 and you don't normally eat till 8, you're probably not going to handle that as well, even though it's earlier in the day. There is a little bit of a circadian rhythm aspect that your body is used to, and it dials in when you typically eat. And so if that's off, I think the big thing being, for me, the biggest thing is like if you're flying, right, you're waking up super early, you want to eat a little something, probably not the time to down like a bunch of oatmeal. It's probably, hey, maybe you just do like a Greek yogurt, high protein. Because again, I think protein isn't the timing of it in terms of circadian rhythm is less, there's not as big of an impact from that standpoint. But again, carbs and fats, there's like a lot bigger of an impact there. So again, we want to dial in our circadian rhythm, not only from getting sunlight throughout the day, limiting blue light at night, but really sticking to that consistent sleep and wake schedule. And then again, just really avoiding large carbohydrate meals too close to bed, because again, your body's just not going to handle those carbs as well. And again, we want to improve our carb quality, right? So we want to choose slower digesting, fiber-rich carbs like potatoes, sweet potatoes, oats, lentils, beans, berries, and fruit. And really, we want to cut back on ultra-processed stuff where we can. Pretty simple explanation there, right? Carb quality is super important. Again, that's where I see most people get things screwed up is they don't handle carbs, or the choices they make are not great. And that's really what the big thing is. Not only are they not getting all these other things that we talked about, but then the choices are not great. And that's what really the big issue is here. And so we want to be smarter with our carb choices as well. A takeaway is, if you get a poor night's sleep, hey, I'm not going to be handling carbohydrates as well the next day, but I have training that I want to do. I want to do well in it. Hey, maybe you're doing more carbohydrates around training, and then you're also improving your carb sources. And that's a simple way to improve how your body handles carbohydrates. And maybe you're focused a little bit more on stress management that day as well too. Maybe you're not necessarily like pushing super hard training. Your HRV is super low that day. All right, then maybe you adjust that. I think more so with the HRV and resting heart rate, it's more kind of long-term trends that we're looking at. But I think you could also use it acutely as well too there. One other thing I wanted to bring up too is mitochondria. And I think this goes into building your cardiovascular system, because in turn, when you build your cardiovascular system, it's going to improve your mitochondria. But again, so big thing being like when if we're not doing conditioning or not building up our mitochondria, which can happen through conditioning and things like that, our mitochondria can't produce as much of our body's energy currency ATP as it typically does. And so our cells struggle to perform glucose dependent functions, right? So again, that's going to impact how your body handles carbohydrates. So I just wanted to throw that one in there. I think that's super important as well too, in terms of the conditioning side of things. And then magnesium too. So making sure you're supplementing with magnesium, I think can be super helpful as well too. Again, that's a supplement that is hard to get in the diet. Poor soil quality impacts how much magnesium we're getting on top of that. And again, this is where, and then things like stress and high activity levels and things like that will deplete magnesium a little bit sooner. And so again, we want to make sure we're getting enough magnesium. Basically, even in non-diabetic individuals with normal magnesium levels, magnesium supplementation significantly improved fasting blood glucose, insulin levels, and insulin sensitivity markers, all things that are going to be helpful from how your body handles carbohydrates. So make sure you're supplementing with magnesium as well too. All right. And then finally, so a couple other thoughts here is the menstrual cycle definitely will impact how your body handles carbs as well too. So in the luteal phase, which is that phase leading up to the bleed, you may need to pay closer attention to these strategies, right? So this is where you really want to double down on them and just understand that your body might not be as efficient as handling carbohydrates. This is why I'm a huge fan of tracking biofeedback with clients, because it's like, okay, if that's the case, now we know that, hey, maybe we need to be smarter with our carbohydrate choices. Maybe we need to time carbohydrates better, more so during this period of time, right? Just because our body's not as good at handling them during that period of time there. And then we want to, just because you're eating carbs and gaining a pound or two from one day to the next does not mean you don't tolerate them well, right? It's usually just water and glycogen. So if you're low carbohydrate and then you have a high carbohydrate day, you're going to see an increase in water weight. That doesn't mean you don't handle them well. But again, we want to refer back to all these things I mentioned today and see if we can increase that. So again, I think some takeaways here is carbohydrates aren't the issue. It's just really it's lifestyle factors and what we're doing from day to day in terms of timing of carbohydrates, carbohydrate sources. And again, like I said, what we're doing from a training perspective that is all going to be problematic here. Again, if you get a poor night's sleep, now we just need to be smarter with some of these things, right? If you have a better cardiovascular system and you get a poor night's sleep, the impact's going to be less. The more muscle you have, you get a poor night's sleep, your body's going to handle things better, right? So again, all these things come together, and I think it's important to understand that part of this is like, we want to get to a point to where we know your body's going to handle them better, but then it's also, hey, if I have times where now I know my body's not going to, here's some things I can do to get it to handle better. And again, when we can do this, we can improve our performance, which in turn is going to help with body composition long term as well too. And it's obviously going to help with body composition in your fat loss phases, in your maintenance phase, your building phases, because again, if we can handle carbohydrates better in a surplus, we're likely going to limit fat gain. And then we're going to be able to lose body fat much easier as well too when we want to do that there. So hopefully this was helpful. Let me know if you guys have any questions on this. You can reach out to me on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active on social media. And then if you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find it. That's it for now. I'll chat with you guys next time.